Good afternoon, everybody. I will call the meeting to order of the Management Committee on this day of August 23rd. And we do have a quorum, and so we'll begin. Right now, if there aren't any changes, we'll just assume that the agenda is approved. Does anyone have any changes? All right, seeing none, then we'll move forward. We have the approval of the August 9th, 2023 Management Committee draft minutes. Everybody's had a chance to review those. Are there any questions, any changes? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve those draft minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Lilligren, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Pacheco. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no, and that passes unanimously. We'll now move on to our non-consent business reports of standing committees, and our first item today is 2023-179 JTSW Joint Same Week Special August Transportation Amendment. And we've got Stewart today, Director of Budget, who will present to us. And is there anybody else? Nick, are you going to join in on this one? Thank you. Welcome, and move forward on this item.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Stewart McMullan. I'm the Budget Director here at the Met Council, and we'll be introducing budget item 2023-179 JT, the Special August Transportation Budget Amendment. With me to discuss this amendment is Nick Thompson, Interim Executive Director of the Regional Transit Infrastructure Division. The 2023 Special August Transportation Amendment makes one change to the capital budget in transportation. The proposed amendment was reviewed and approved by the Transportation Committee on August 14th. This amendment recognizes $70.3 million in revenue from Hennepin County for the Bottineau Light Rail Blue Line Extension Project. These funds are being brought into the project's ACP as indicated on Table 9 of the attachment. The motion is that the Metropolitan Council authorizes the 2023 Unified Budget as amended and in accordance with the attached table. With that, I'll let Nick say more about this business item.
Thank you. Welcome, Nick.
Madam Chair, committee members, so this item is tied to what you'll see also at the council tonight, which is the Hennepin County Met Council Capital Grant Agreement for Blue Line Extension. We'll be making a presentation on that. We presented at the transportation, agreement. This is the financial component of that. Yesterday, Hennepin County passed this grant agreement at their commission or at their board to authorize this funding for the council. So the capital grant agreement is the next step on the Blue Line extension as it regards to our agreement with the county as the local funder. This is one of the key steps in the development of a major project. And the Transway Advancement Policy that the council passed last November, this is a step that we come forward and talk about risks related to the project before you make a decision about whether to approve moving the project forward. Capital grant agreement is a step, if approved, is a step forward. We are under our current capital grant agreement with Hennepin County, as we have been for several years. That expires at August 31st, and so this would be a new capital grant agreement this funding would be used for. That starts on September 1st and goes the motion, really the funding is to cover through 2024. And so in that time frame, we expect that the Quarter Management Committee would recommend a preferred alternative. We begin our supplemental draft EIS phase. We would be doing, of course, a lot of public engagement within this time period this grant covers. We'd be asking for municipal consent from all the 5 cities along the corridor of the county, and essentially community approval of the project. We're anticipating summer of next year. So the grant itself will be used for project staff. Also, a lot of it is for our consultants that we hire for engineering, public engagement, risk management, project controls, items like that. Those engineering contracts were awarded earlier this spring. The council gave unlimited authority for those to basically has got us through August 31st. And so this grant would allow us to continue those. This grant, though, is a major change from the last capital grant agreement, which it defines how this project will be governed between the board, council, and Hennepin County. And it can be governed differently than we have on other projects like the Green Line extension. There's a new board created called the Project Decisions Board that is made up of 3 members of Hennepin County, 2 Met Council members, and that board would be established if the capital grant agreement is approved. So they would start after that, and that is a board where we would bring eventually things like change orders, which we do ECCB, but that's a board that discuss project risk, discuss project budget, other items to kind of jointly manage this project. It really brings Hennepin County far more forward in the process of the project. So it's a very different. It does not give up any authority of the council. So the board is not a final stop for things like procurements or major change orders that still need to go through our regular committee structure. But we see as a major positive step. We're also managing the project much different than we have on past projects. Hennepin County staff is fully embedded in the project, from the deputy director down. They lead design, they lead the anti-displacement function within the project. They lead a lot of the media, and they're participating in outreach. Since we are building on, the proposed alignment is on Hennepin County roads, they have a lot of engineering function on that because it is their facilities. And so they're doing they're in the leadership roles in many ways that we have not seen on other projects. So it reflects a major change in that sense. I'll be clear to the council, there still are risks enterprise level with this project as there are with others. Some of the key risks that we discussed earlier this spring have been mitigated in part through the new legislative funding. Our top risks remain tied to the fact that this is a major expansion in our staffing requirements. We're anticipating an opening in this line on the current schedule around 2030. So if you think about Green Line extension opening in 2027 and Blue Line in 2030, we'll need to roughly double the size of our staff that supports light rail, in addition to our other growth in our system. So that from not just operators and mechanics, but that's law enforcement, maintenance, other functions like that. So represents a major expansion to our system if it moves forward. Financially, the legislature, with big change in the capital grant agreement, is resolving some conflicts on financial assignment. The council is no longer responsible for capital on this project, or capital risk on this project. That is a responsibility for local dollars of the county. We do retain the responsibility if we receive federal funds to the region. We're the recipient of those, not the county. So we're responsible for that. But the grant agreement reflects that the county is responsible for cost increases should they occur. They can come to us, but we are not committed to anything on that. We are responsible for operating costs after the line opens, and obviously maintenance and the long-term capital maintenance of this line. So that's, in the long term, there's a new capital risk, a capital expense that the council will take on by building this that is clearly defined as a council responsibility. Prior to this legislative session, that was not, it was essentially a risk that was undefined who was responsible for. So that is now clearly our responsibility for this project and all our capital projects. So so the action here is just around the budget related to this agreement. Later this afternoon at council, it's both, if this budget passes, it's the budget and the capital grant agreement, 2 separate business items. So I'll kind of pause there and see what questions you have about this.
Thanks, Nick. I appreciate the presentation. Thank you very much. Stewart, does the committee have any questions? Councilmember Lilligren?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. And thanks for bringing this forward. And it's just a question about sequencing, right? And I guess we'll see this in full council in just a few hours. And so full council will be considering whatever action we take here. But just about the sequencing between approving the budget piece before we actually approve the agreement with Hennepin County. I wonder if you can just comment on that.
Madam Chair, Councilmember, tonight at council, the sequence, the path it's followed, which we followed with other capital agreements, both the capital agreement and the budget were at transportation.
Sure.
And then budget comes here, and then
Okay.
tonight, the first business item on the agenda of the two is the capital grant agreement. So, that would pass before you go to the
Okay.
budget at the full council.
Thank you.
That's the sequence.
Appreciate it.
No,
Thank
great
you.
question, trust me, I'm going, how does this
Right,
voter really matters,
right,
right? Because every now and then, you know, over my 20 years, you're like, hey, this can't be on consent because we have something on general business, you know,
That has to
so.
be approved first.
Yeah, so that's a great question, thank you.
Thank you.
Just
Councilmember
a
Barber,
quick editorial note, it passed on a divided vote at transportation committee.
Well, and to that, Madam Chair,
Councilman.
we're gonna have a fuller conversation, I'm sure, at council today. Excuse me, but Nick, in your opening comments, you mentioned how this relates to the agreement that we'll see on the Blue Line Extension Capital Grant Agreement. It's a negotiated agreement with Hennepin County. It's been a robust, conversation, and well, I guess Councilmember Barber disagrees, but there's been a lot of conversation about this agreement to get to there. And so I'm just wondering, Nick, if you can comment, or either of you can comment on, we've negotiated this agreement, if we don't approve these pieces, both the agreement itself and the funding, what that means to the whole sort of project and the relationship with Hennepin County and how we might go forward.
Sure. Madam Chair, committee members, that is a great question, it's one we've been asked. So technically, if it does not pass tonight, and I'll talk about the grant and the budget as one, the funding that we have for our consulting contracts would, goes through August 31st. So
Okay.
we would need to
Couple weeks.
pause those agreements. Our staff that work on the project are paid through capital grant agreements, so we have great staff and we will find a way to retain them under a different funding mechanism, but they would no longer be paid through the counties, because we would not have an active grant that the county's funding for our staff positions. In terms of, without our consultant support, the project would have to slow down in terms of some steps. We'd have to stop, their extension of staff in many ways. There is a big decision that being made in September for Quarter Management Committee. They will be voting on a resolution for the preferred route. I believe we'd be able to staff that meeting and bring forward that resolution. We wouldn't have our consultant support for that function if we didn't have an active grant agreement. So, but then the work needed to advance design would have to pause until we have a new agreement.
Thank you, Nick. And Madam Chair, just one final question. And then you referenced this as well, the impact of the fairly newly adopted Transitway Advancement Policy. This is kind of one of the first lines to really get under that level of scrutiny, and it's kind of well down the line to start applying this new policy to it. I'm supportive of the Transitway Management Policy. But right now, these are Henderson County funds, and I understand that the agreement does put at risk some of the Metropolitan Council funds and federal funds in the future, not at risk, but under consideration. And so I'm just wondering if you can talk a little more about whatever safeguards are created because we now have the Transitway, whatever safeguards and risk mitigation to the Met Council and Metro Transit are in place because we now have the Transitway Advancement Policy going forward, if we should approve this today.
Sure. Madam Chair, Councilor, that's a great question. I mean, this is a gate we are at in the Transitway Advancement Policy. Well, it said we would apply the policy. So there's nothing, and Blue Line just happens to be at that gate.
Sure.
This is not targeting Blue Line in any way. We've applied the policy to ABRT already, and we've applied, I believe, to Purple Line, a major change on Purple Line. So this is not first.
Sure.
But it is, we are applying the policy here. It is, the grant and the policy is basically, the proposed action is to move the project through the gate to the next phase. which is, the grant is a 2-year grant. So this is not a commitment to construction.
Sure.
There will be application of the policy, several steps again before we do begin construction. So if new risks are developed that makes it that you do not, it's not ready to advance further, those actions will become before the council and the policy would apply. A couple steps where that will occur is this grant only goes through the action tonight is proposed to go through municipal consent.
Sure.
So if it passes municipal consent, I think that's an important step for the council to know whether the community is supported. But if it does pass through all the gates of municipal consent of every community, then we'll come back to the council and say, do you want to continue forward with continuing the grant forward or not? The action requires us to come back and ask, and we can update. We would clearly be updating you on the fact if it makes it through municipal consent, we have community support for that project at that point. I mean, right now, community support is a risk. There's definitely some concern being expressed about if this project. So, but once municipal consent passes, that risk is reduced. And then prior to any construction, we would clearly be coming back to the council before any procurement is advertised, a step like that related to the Transway policy. But next year, you'll know things like ridership. If we continue on the path that we're forecasting, you'll know ridership, project cost, land right-of-way impacts. Those are elements that occur between September 1st and municipal consent starting. So some big questions that this council has had about it. We'll be getting that information for you before the next time we ask you to advance through the Transway advancement policy.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you, no, great questions, thank you for that clarification. So we're in a tenuous spot to make sure that we, as my council members, are governing in the way that we should be. So, Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will be voting no on this tonight, as I did at Transportation Committee. I want to say it has very little to do with the blue line. It is, I do think it's a good project. I do want to ensure that the communities along the corridor are served with robust transit. That is clearly a priority. That is something we've told them we will do. We will find a way to do that. And but when we adopted the Transitway Advancement Policy, it was as we were coming out of negotiating the prior funding deal with Hennepin County, where we had to expend some funds. That was the first time for one of these projects had to happen. And in order for us to get comfortable with that process, we as council members adopted the Transitway Advancement Policy. And that was so that we could have more say, so that we could have a part in those decisions along the way. I am very sure that that is not how this has happened when it comes to the Green Line discussion. So under the Transitway policy, there's project risks and then there's enterprise risks. I do think our staff has done a great job on the project risks. I think that we are in a really good position. I agree with how they've structured the capital grant agreement of really defining much better roles and responsibilities. It's really showing we learned a lot of our lessons. You know, also this new project for structure, which really is more of a shared responsibility model, which is something that has been really lacking from the Green Line extension. Everything always gets turned back to, well, council, you did this. And the reality is it is a shared project, and I don't think that gets said enough. So project risks, feel pretty good about. The enterprise risks are a different thing. That's like stand back and look at all the capital projects that we're doing and where the funding sources are coming for the money we would be contributing. I'll talk more about this tonight, but it's 65% of our 5307 funds for the next 3 years. That is money that goes into capital and that goes into fleet for the 7-county metro area. And that's where my discomfort is. It isn't with the project. It isn't with the project risks or the project or the CGA. I do think that, and the PDB is the model going forward. I want to say that over and over. I know Nick has heard me say it many times, that I do mean that they've done a great job with that. But I can really guarantee you when you talk about robust discussions and transparency, I can very much guarantee that everyone around the table there tonight was not involved in those discussions, including myself. I think that we were more told what the the deal was, and that's another level of discomfort that I have.
Thank you, Councilmember Barber. Are there any other questions? I'll just jump on what Councilmember Barber said. I too have a lot of praise for what staff has done on this. I am very committed to that transit way. I think, time is for North Minneapolis and Robbinsdale and Crystal and all the way up to Brooklyn Park to get a robust transportation system and great investment. So I'm committed to that. And I really do appreciate where you've gone with the capital grant agreement. I will just, I guess, echo what Councilmember Barber said, that the new information that's coming forward is that there was a deal announced on Monday. And I don't want to use the word deal anymore. I'd like to use the word proposal, because there is no deal until this council and Hennepin County, as the last phrase of the one-page announcement said. And so, I can tell you, I have had to be a detective just about, and I see some smiles here because I have asked and I have prodded and I have said, where is this at and how is it working and who's involved and what does it mean? And all I have are my notes from a meeting with the chair, and Councilmember Barber was on that call too, because I just am like, is this coming to management? Are we being transparent with the taxpayers? This goes way beyond Hennepin County, where the impacts are going to, be felt throughout the region. I am a Hennepin County member here on the Metropolitan Council, but I represent 11 cities that also have interests in projects that will be moving forward. But certainly if I wasn't in Hennepin County, I would be very concerned about the proposal that was put forward for us to consider. It's really hard for me to consider something that I personally don't have great understanding on, and I don't understand in the out years how it's going to impact projects that are already in the pipeline. And the flip side of the coin is that we've got great projects in the pipeline. We're starting to see a wonderful multimodal transportation system be built throughout this entire region. But and I recognize we have to get Southwest figured out. But I think that it's a very big disservice to this council and the council members that we don't have a more robust discussion with a lot of discovery, answering our questions, asking about other projects, whether it's Ramsey County, Dakota County, Washington County, Sherburne County, missing counties, all the counties that have other projects. We've got, Riverside, we've got, in my district potentially, probably after I'm long gone, Highway 55. So, people just need to know what this means for everybody else in the region. And we have not done that yet at all. So I'll be talking about that later today as well. Again, very committed to a transit way in the corridor that we're talking about for Blue Line. But I also will echo what Councilmember Bento said at the Transportation Committee, and I really am concerned about the displacement. And I'm very sympathetic and open to the people that are coming forward, whether they're the West Broadway Business Association, even with the new route that will move it off of West Broadway and onto 21st. Love to hear more about from the folks on 21st. Also concerned about, I know we have an anti-displacement effort in place, and hats off to the teams and the people that are working on that. But we know that this is going to be a big project that runs through this corridor, and it's very different than the BNSF corridor that was originally contemplated, where you've got your corridor, you're not going to be having the same types of impacts. This has shifted something into the neighborhoods, and I know there is support for this, but I know there are grave concerns, and especially so coming out of Robbinsdale and North Minneapolis, and of course then we heard from somebody in the North Loop today who have their concerns. So I'm going to be paying attention to that. So for me tonight, I will not be voting for this. But with that said, I'd like more time. I'd like to understand the Southwest agreement and how it impacts everybody. And I also want to find a way that we can mitigate not only, we have huge, let me just say this, I believe, based on what I was told, because I'm a member of the Transit Policy Making Work Group, and that was last winter, that there were huge risks on this project that are being felt in other projects. And I agree with you, Nick, that we are all very grateful to the legislature for putting forward sustainable funding for the Met Council. We need that in order to build out this entire system. So thank you to the legislature, the governor, and the members who support that. But what I am concerned about, and for sure in leading this committee, but as a council member, we are not at the strength we need to be right now for our police officers. I think we're authorized 171 and we're well below 120. We will be, as you said, bringing out Southwest. We are trying to bring back routes that we have not been able to bring back since COVID. And I hear this from everybody out there. The world has changed immensely. We're the place where data is kept, and we do a lot of analysis. And we know that some lines are coming back more than others. We know that we've got some struggles, with certain lines. We have challenges with LRT, and I will say we are doing great things to address some of the social ailments that are showing up on our transit stations and on our trains. It is not just a public safety issue. We need help from the county with social workers, and I know they're short social workers. We need help from the justice system, and I know they've got their issues too, but we all need to pull together as one big region to fix that, and we're not there yet. We are not there yet. So I think that it's important that the council take a breath and that we govern and we say, let's really be very deliberate about the information we need to make good decisions and the process by which we come up with proposals or deals so that the council can be engaged. I know that on this committee, for example, we often will give parameters that negotiations will take place within. I don't think anything like that took place, that the council could have some ideas around, parameters or some forethought about what might be the result that we would then eventually have to consider. I also don't know, it's pending our approval, when will that happen? So I think it's very important. I will say that in a phone call with Chair Zelli Friday, he thought September. I think Councilmember Barber might speak for yourself, but think that it really happens when we bring in the funds, which could be in early 2024. But I'm not ready to move forward on any of this, knowing that we've got an important blue line project sitting there, but we've got a lot of other stuff that's all really functioning around how we fund these things and our relationship with Hennepin County. And lastly, I will say too, I do appreciate the county commissioners digging in on this. I mean, I haven't spoken to any of them in any detail at all on this. I don't know what their process was. I know the intentions by everybody is good, and it is here too. So, but today, in my humble opinion, and for having governed in certain bodies for over 20 some years, this is just not how I govern, and I'll repeat myself. I am not about 11th hour governing. I've done that on occasion here in my first 4 years on the council because we had to, we were on the deadline. And I said, okay, I trust the staff and you guys are doing a great job. But it doesn't bode well because then we end up with problems that come forward on Southwest. And I know this is our moment with our transitway advancement policy. Let's use it, let's take a breath and let's govern. So I'm hoping today that the council members will be able to do that. We'll have a more robust discussion at council, but I will not be supporting this today. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Madam. Just a very quick comment. It is my understanding that we will not be voting on the overall Green Line funding proposal, that it will come to us as budget amendments as money comes in. And then also that this, because of the size of it and the nature of the funds, will also need a TIP amendment, so it will have to be approved by TAP.
Councilmember Cedarburg and then Lilligren.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I represent District 11, the east side of town, and the biggest concern I'm hearing from constituents and that I have is really spelling out what the future impacts are and where the money's going to go for expansion in communities where bus lines are not being reinstated. And I think it was brought home when somebody called me and said, why isn't there a state fair bus on the east side of town? There's not one in Woodbury. They added one in Blaine, and there's one out west, and there's one south, but there's not one on the east side of town. And I got a lot of calls, and a lot of, it's like, okay, we're left out again. I mean, that's the feeling that people are having, and like the Century College bus just got reinstated. Students were having to leave class early because of the hour bus, and they're missing classes. So enrollment is down for that. So how is this project going to impact the availability of funds to maybe stretch into some new things and to recapture what was lost in COVID for people in the outer ring as well. And so that's the concern that I'm hearing. But not having a state fair bus on the east, that really made a lot of people pretty upset.
Councilmember Lilligren.
Cool, I'm sorry, Councilmember Cedarburg, was that a question? How does this impact these, or those rhetorical?
I'm just rhetorical.
Okay,
just
thank you.
Thank you.
That's helpful.
Sorry,
Thanks.
sorry.
All right, cool, thank you. And I appreciate this debate. I plan on supporting this today, and I urge other committee members to do so. I'll speak in favor of the full council as well. And just to remind this, I have a question to clarify from something that you said, Madam Chair, and you said this isn't a deal until the county kind of approves it as well. And I thought, Nick, you said in your opening that the county has voted on that agreement, or?
Madam Chair, Councilmember, that's a good question. So they have voted on the Blue Line capital grant agreement funding, the 75, that is tied to the business, essentially the item we're debating. But the agreement on funding the Green Line funding gap needs to come forward.
Okay.
And the implementation of that agreement will come before this council in many different ways, either through budgets, potential actual agreement with the county, TIP amendments. So there's the implementation of the agreed upon solution will come before the council in multiple steps that we'll be able to lay out. But what I was referring to is the county's approving the $75 million.
And if I just want clarification too, and that's why I'm calling it a proposal. But that's also, so Friday I thought it would be coming forward to us in September, and I was assuming the county would take a vote on the Southwest proposal. That's not happening. So it comes in drips and drabs, and so but we're being asked to move forward on Blue Line without knowing really where this other thing is going to go. So I'm just putting that in people's minds, but I want to clarify my comment.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to note that the concerns, the grave concerns that you're referencing and that others have are the pieces that will be addressed with the work that's to be done with the $75 million. And so absent this kind of investment, we're not going to get those grave concerns addressed. And conflating these with other issues like police, this is $75 million that the county is putting on the table for this project's costs. And these aren't going to go to fund police. They're not going to go to fund state fair buses as much as we'd like them to. And so this is a negotiated agreement that we need these funds to get to those next answers. And I would argue that, well, the staff said it as well, so I guess I don't need to argue it. I would just restate that this is completely consistent with our transitway advancement policy. The dribs and drabs that you talk about, Madam Chair, those will come before us. That's what we do. That's governing. So we'll get to entertain those in time. But absent this kind of an infusion into the project, we're not going to get to the answers of those questions. And I love that you bring up the anti-displacement. And now we're to the threshold point of what implementation of that's going to look like. And I'm already sensing, and I've been off the corridor management committee for a few months now, but sort of almost a stepping away of some of the jurisdictions, but to what that might look like to fund and implement. And I would just mention again, if without these capital dollars, that anti-displacement work isn't going to continue like we want it to. And so I plan on supporting this. I feel like the council needs to support it as well. I'm completely in understanding of the more parochial arguments that we're making about other projects in our wards, but we're a region, right? And we're trying to govern as a region. So I hope folks can support this today.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. I really appreciate your points of view, for sure. Anybody else? Yeah. And I would just say one thing. This is good work, first of all. And this is important. Not enough times do we have the rigorous debates that I think we should be having. And I do appreciate the parochialism, but yet it is regional. And even though I'm a Hennepin County resident and I'm working on behalf of my constituents, my constituents have concerns about some of this too. So let me just be clear. When we talk about the risk for the project or the enterprise, when it comes to police and when it comes to maintenance workers and when it comes to operators, and as Nick said, we've got Green Line, and then by bringing on Blue Line, we're going to have to double. And I think that's conservative. Think about too that we've got turnover, which is normal, but trying to find workers right now is very difficult, and the pipeline for police officers certainly is very slim. So I think that for me, I am so proud that we've all adopted the transitway advancement policy, because for me, I would like some of this answered, and for me, the new information coming forward is this proposal on a funding arrangement for Southwest. So, you know, I think that you know, before we move forward on all of this, let's at least have the council be clear on what all of this means in the big picture, and certainly for this important project that would be the blue line. So, because we don't want to get this wrong. You know, we're under that white hot light for Southwest, and that is fine. But let's make sure that this most important project too for this part of our region is not pushed too quickly. And I'm not saying we're rushing and staff's doing a great job, but this is a moment in time where we can take a breath. I'm not even saying that we don't move forward on it. I'm just saying there might need some more time for other council members to fully understand what the ramifications for Southwest is, what the blue line is, and for everything else we have in queue. Funding has changed immensely, and we have a new infusion of funding. But with that said, we're taking on new obligations that have been relieved from the counties. So we have to do the math. And little me coming from city world, managing some decent sized budgets, when we would look at the future, we would have our capital plans that would say, all right, this fleet needs to be, or pieces of the fire department and trucks need to be replaced. Technology needs to be replaced. Big expenditures out there. And we had to manage towards that. And sometimes we'd go to the legislature or whatever, if we could get some bonding money or whatever. I want to see what that looks like. I don't know what that looks like here at the council. We've got all these lines coming on. I think I've heard, and maybe it was Councilmember Barber in one of our transit meetings, but you know, blue line trains are going to need replacement in, you know, the not so distant future. So those are the things I'm not trying to do anything that would, you know, stop or slow a transit way. This part of the region needs exceptional service. So I think it's about making sure that the council feels good about how it's voting today. So let me be clear on that. Any further discussion? Councilmember Chen.
Excuse me, Nick wanted to say something.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, there's a couple things swirling here about essentially impact on what else we do. There's a couple, you know, there'll be the agreement coming forward, there'll be the blue line. But there's also, we're coming forward with the new budget, what you're referring to, a capital improvement budget. Part of this agreement of using federal funds in the Southwest is that we have to ensure that our CIP is still funded. Mm-hmm. We've done enough work since that I'm confident we can say we are not only funding our CIP, we're going to be able to invest more in the transit system, what we want to invest in, what we've been directed to invest in. So you should have confidence that this is not going to cause us to not be able to replace the vehicles we need. We have it, and we can also confidently now say our metro vision for transitways, we can realize that vision now. Not out with this deal, it's because of what has been changed in the funding formula. So we are not, our vision is still what we're going to implement for the metro system, and we are funding and growing our CIP even in addition to this deal. So I think we're not cutting any projects out of that because of this. And we have to, because we're using federal funds, yes, we have to demonstrate to FTA that we can use 5307 without compromising the state of a good repair of ours and the replacement of our vehicles and stuff. So we've seen enough, and we will be presenting to the council in the budget cycle this fall, which a confidence in that projection, both in the time frame of the budget, but also we're working on what is that 30-year time frame, because that's what you really need to think about capital.
And I appreciate that, and I look forward to hearing all of that. Today is great to hear for the first time today, but I look forward to really being convinced with my council members around me when we hear it as a group. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I do appreciate that. As Nick knows, I've been asking for exactly this because 5307 funds are funds that are used for capital. We typically use it for fleet replacement. When asked the things because we don't have the full detailed analysis that's been shared with any of us yet, the things that could be affected are new projects, things like microtransit, the timing and pace of the electrification of our fleet. This 5307 money goes to Metro Transit, it goes to MTS, it goes to the suburban providers, all three of those entities. But now you've decreased 65% of that will now just go to one county.
Are there any other questions? Are we ready to vote? All right, with that, did we have a motion? Okay,
I'll move approval.
there's a motion to approve, is there a second?
Second.
Second? All right, let's take a roll call vote on this, please.
Councilmember Lee?
Aye.
Councilmember Barber?
No.
Councilmember Pacheco?
Aye.
Councilmember Lilligren?
Aye.
Councilmember Cedarburg?
No.
Councilmember Johnson?
No, and that does not pass. So with this, this item will move to the full council and I'll report out on it. I'll be reporting out that it went to transportation on a split vote and then it did not pass this body as well. I would like to,
What was the vote in transportation?
It was 6-2, and if I may, it was before any information was released.
It was 6-2.
yes, correct, yes, thank you. I
Thank you.
can mention that too if that helps the rest of the
Yeah, I
body.
think
Since
so.
you made
That's
the,
fair.
I'm gonna make a note that that's important to. So I will just say on this, I might have some other motion to bring to the full council to try to address so that we're not moving. I think it's also not great to move this kind of stuff forward on a very divided vote. I'm the type of person who likes to build consensus and try to figure out how we can make sure people's concerns get addressed. And then if they choose to vote no still, that's fine. And if they choose to vote yes, then they're voting yes with the information. And again, I'll just point out a lot of new information dropped on Monday that impacts funding for this council. So I appreciate this discussion and I appreciate everybody being here and being so attentive. And I know we all want the best for the Blue Line corridor. I know we all want to figure out everything we can, certainly Southwest. I want to thank the county. We're just moving through a process here at the Met Council, and that's what we're supposed to be doing. And hopefully, whoever is watching this meeting and will be watching the next meeting, they know that we are really taking to heart our job here. And for me, I'm just trying to make sure that it's not another 11th hour vote, that I just truly don't understand the ramifications beyond what we have on the page here today. That's important, I know, for many people across this region, and I know it's important for everybody here. So with that, let's move on to our next item on the agenda tonight. So we have item 2023-174JT, and it is our 2023 Unified Budget Amendment, third quarter, and Stewart's gonna stay with us and help us get through this one. This is a big one, but it might not be as lengthy of a debate, but who knows? So here we go. It's yours, Stewart. You can take
Thank
us
you,
there.
Madam Chair. 2023-174 JT, as you said, is the third quarter operating budget, and it makes third quarter budget amendment makes changes to the operating budget in regional administration, community development, environmental services, and transportation, and makes changes to the capital budget in community development, environmental services, and transportation. It passed the Transportation Committee on August 14th, Community Development Committee August 21st, and the Environmental Services Committee yesterday, August 22nd.
Yep.
The notable changes in the operating budget, first of all, it takes the Business Process Systems Integration Project, what we call BPSI, and moves it from what is now in our operating budget into the IS operating capital budget. For the first time, very notably, it brings the regional sales tax funds into this budget, incorporating two changes that were prescribed by the enacting legislation. First of all, Metro Transit will be swapping out $9.9 million in what had been local money and using sales tax money for that in bus operations, light rail, and North Star. Secondly, MTS will be bringing in $9 million appropriated to 4 suburban transit providers for pass-through grants for microtransit service. Again, those two changes were prescribed in the enacting legislation for the sales tax. Turning to Metro Mo, we'll be adding $2 million in their expense budget and use of reserves for increased driver hourly rates and contracts. And we'll be in community development adding $3 million in federal revenue and pass-through grants in the AHRA. It adds $4.75 million in state appropriations for capital improvements in the city of Newport and for planning work in the city of White Bear Lake in our environmental services program, and had $7 million in expenditures for environmental services to fund inflationary costs for chemicals and utilities. Turning to the capital budget, it adds a total of $300 million to the Metro Transit Authorized Capital Program, or ACP, for 16 projects primarily supported by the federal government and state appropriations. It adds a total of $3 million to the MTS ACP for 7 projects, and adds a total of $116 million to the Community Development ACP for 16 projects. Again, many of those appropriated or supported by appropriations this past legislative session and federal revenues. All these projects are listed in tables 9, 10, and 11. So the motion is that the Metropolitan Council authorizes the 2023 unified budget as amended and in accordance with the attached tables.
Thank you, Stewart. Are there any questions? All right, I'd entertain a motion then to move the proposed action by staff.
So moved.
It's been moved by Barbara. Is there a second? Seconded by Lee. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed no, and that passes unanimously. Great. We now move on to our information items, and this is also a great item that we'll be discussing today. I'd like to take this one for sure. It's to recommend the 2024 health and dental premium rates, and we would have with us Marie Henderson, our acting chief financial officer. Thanks, Marie, for joining us.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. I am Marie Henderson. I am your acting deputy CFO. Totally going to switch gears right now and think of cooler times. This fall is coming up for open enrollment, and it's a period where we come in front of you for showing our general concurrence and asking for general concurrence for the recommended premium rates that we have for our self-insurance, health and dental plans that we have here at the council. For rate settings, I will say that we are focusing on the total premium that is needed. It's not broken out between employee and employer share. That's what the union contracts will be doing. So all the numbers here that you'll see are for the total premium. So in rate setting, I will say it's just math, but it's complicated math. We have a contractor to do the actuarial calculations about these projected costs that we will have over the next 12 months. It is a 24-month claim experience that they use too, so further and further away that we get from 2020. Some of those COVID costs that we had with capacity and vaccinations and testing are starting to roll off, but we are still seeing high claims here at the council, and I'll show you a graph a little bit later about where we have healthcare claims averaging about 7%, but history is showing the world is about 8% now with the increased costs and where that lands with our premiums. But what the actuarial has said is that our projected costs for next year, including all the costs and our medical trends of higher rates for pharmaceuticals too, and administrative costs and inflation would be $88.6 million. Our current enrollment with our premiums with staff would be, because we set our rates to cover our expenses, and that's at 81.2%. So mathematically saying that we have a calculation of 9.1% to increase our premiums for 2024 to cover the costs that are projected for 2024. I do want to remind you that we have 3 medical plans here at the council. One is open access. Open access is available to ATU members and early retirees that are in the ATU plan. Distinctions and empowered HRA, which is the high deductible, are open to all employees, not just non-ATU. It's just to kind of remind you of the 3 medical plans that we have here. We have set, and we have been using self-insurance since 2013 is the first time that we went fully in self-insured for medical and 14 for dental. And we've set principles on how do we set the premiums. And the first principle that we have is that since open access is, it's not a closed plan, but it is, it's only allowed for ATU folks, that plan should be self-contained and the costs should be covered by the people enrolled in that plan. And distinctions in HRA were anticipated to combine those costs and have the cost of that plan over the enrollees in those two plans. So with that being said, and I said earlier the gap is 9.1%, which is around $7 million. For open access, when you look at just the claims and the enrollees, it's around a $1.7 million that they need to cover for that gap, which is 6.7%. And combining distinctions and HRA, it is a 10.3% increase, or almost $6 million from last year. And we'll remind you that last year it was a 10.9%, but dollars are pretty much the same. So we're looking at pretty much the same increase that we had in the prior year.
Madam Chair, just on the slide.
Oh, please.
Thanks. You started scamp, yeah. But if you broke the distinctions in HRA into distinct categories, would that still look like the same 10.3%?
Madam Chair and Councilmember Lilligren, they are slightly different. HRA would be covering over some of the distinction costs.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Okay, so we are combining though at the 10.3. The second principle that we have in setting our rates is that the plans are evaluated annually, and that's where we collaborate or calibrate. So we do look at the HRA individually and the distinctions, but we calibrate those together. HRA also, that's a high deductible plan, and the council does put in contributions on the employee side into the HRA fund, and that runs about $3.5 million on average for the employee HRA portion of that. So again, just bringing down that same principle and the funding gap, we have made, I could show on this slide the two different percentages, but we really made that principle to say that distinctions and HRA are blended together at that 10.3%. So what does that all mean? When we look at what our rates are for 2023, and we put those side by side for 2024. Again, this is the total premium by month. How it breaks out by plan is all by the union contracts. There is an overall goal when you're the single plan to have employee share around that 10% and family share around 20%. But not all plans are at those percentages, so but just giving you an idea of what the breakout would be. Okay. We also build in some risk mitigation within our self-insurance plans. Of course, that is our reserve. We hold a reserve about 35% of our expenses. I will say in 20 to 21 and 21 to 22, each of those years, we used $6 million each year of that reserve. We were still slightly above target at those years, so it brought us right at that 35%. So currently we are at 35%. If we are within our actuarial predictions of costs of that $88 million this year, then our reserves will hold at 35% where we should get for target. The other risk mitigation that we have here is our stop loss coverage. So any large claims, and the council has used this stop loss in the past, it holds at $750K per claim. And we have an aggregate stop loss too of 1.25%. So our last premium or our last risk setting principle is that We have reserves, and we were able to use those for one-time items in the past throughout the years. When we've had above that 35%, we've used it to pay employees for vaccination cards proof during COVID. We've been able to also put in some healthcare spending account. Because we are right at target, we need to hold that at the 35% for a little while, and hopefully medical costs will go down in a perfect world, and employees at the council are very healthy and never need to use their insurance, but all hopeful thinking. But that's why we have those reserves. And just to give you a little bit of an idea of, why did we go through $6 million extra above the actuarial expenses? There's a lot of factors out of our control. Healthcare costs skyrocketed. In addition, we had, you can see enrollment is down across the council. Employees are way down in count through 2020, mostly on Metro Transit side, but across the council. So we're building up employees, and of course employees are part of the solution for the premiums.
If I may just, that's interesting because that's another impact or effect of having a worker shortage, that it's showing up here too. So, boy, when you think about worker shortages and demands on that, it gets to this level too in a big way.
Madam Chair, thanks for stopping in this and making that observation. I appreciate it. And so, Marie, that was a question. So the declines that we're seeing are 100% because of a workforce decline, or are employees exercising other options?
Madam Chair and Councilmember Lilligren, it's probably a combination of both.
Okay.
Probably depends if they have a significant other or spouse that may have cheaper insurance, which may be hard to find, but they may have found other alternatives. I'd say most of it though is the decline.
Thank you. Thanks.
And year over year from 22 to 23, we're still 53 headcount down.
And Marie, can I just ask another question? So we're trying to make sure we stay at that 35% target. What if we don't? We just have a year where our experience is not good. Well, then what?
So Madam Chair and committee members, anytime we need to use reserves, we will be here with a budget amendment to ask for the use of those reserves to cover our expenses.
I just want to make sure, that if okay, great. Thank you for clarifying that for me.
Be watching those expenses very closely this year.
Thank you.
As I said earlier in this presentation, the medical trend has been around that 7%. Our actuarial said that no longer is going to hold true, at least start at 8%. And that's an average throughout the state and not the counties, and not just for the council here. We actually have higher claims than the national average here at the council. So just kind of giving you an overview of where our premium increases have been for the last few years. In 2020, we were in front of you saying we're not sure what's going to happen in 2021. Again, keeping the open access within the ATU group of who has that, we knew that would be an increase, but the rest we held at a 0%. That might have hurt us a little bit in the trend, but like I said, we have increased costs, not only within the council with higher claims, but medical itself is increasing. Overall, it's just an increasing trend all around.
And Marie, just again, I know you had mentioned it earlier, because we do provide very good insurance for our employees, and I'm very proud of that. Again, just say a family of 4, or do you have just a couple instances with the monthly rate might be under, let's just say the HRA distinctions plan? What's the percentage that the employee would have to pay?
Again, Madam Chair, committee members, that is all dependent on the union contract.
Okay.
So on average, you would look, if you're a family of 4, about 20% of that 1905 in an HRA plan, that family would be paying.
So under 400 on average. And I just want to put that out there because I think for, again, all of the millions of people who are listening at home, come work for the council. We care about our employees very much and we manage this, and to your credit and everybody who works on this, but I think that is important for people to know, and we're self-insured too. So I just think, these increases are, everybody's feeling them, but I'm also have insurance through an employer, but I've been without an employer trying to get my own insurance, and it's quite a roller coaster ride out there. So even with increases, and that's never fun, and we have to manage that in a big way here, but it helps to make sure that our families aren't so negatively impacted that they're not taking care of themselves the way they should, and especially some of the work that's done here at the council. So I just wanted to put that on the record.
Madam Chair, these are monthly rates and payroll deductions are twice a month. So you can also cut that in half.
Yeah, thank you for that. Councilmember
Yeah,
Lilligren.
thank you, Madam Chair. Marie, on the slide that we were on the medical trend and the rate increases, and I think it's really fascinating that we are above the national trend on claims, and so I'm just wondering what level of analysis we're doing there, or what kind of preventative work we might be doing to see if we can become more in line with the national averages.
Yes, Madam Chair and Councilmember Lilligren, great question. We have had our actuarial in to give an in-depth analysis of what is the cause, even by what kind of cancers people are having here at the council, or what kind of issues, not specific, but very generic. And we have our Well at Work plan that is really trying to engage people of that preventive care that we have missed, a lot of us, during COVID. So what has happened, and on a national average, just not here at the council, a lot of people unfortunately miss those preventive cares, and now maybe stage 3 or 4 when that could have been prevented a little bit earlier. So really, I believe in the past and going forward with HR, we would have presentations about what we are doing for helping employees remember their preventative care, and what kind of programs, and Fit for Life is also another program.
Madam Chair, and then I'm getting a little deep here in the weeds, but do those preventative care programs that include incentives as well? Or rate incentives, let's say?
Madam Chair and Councilmember Lilligren, we have not implemented anything with incentives.
Okay.
I know that there are programs out there that you would get a discount, being a non-smoker or that type of thing. We do not offer that at the council currently. We also have LIMBOC, which is another committee with all the labor negotiation groups.
Can you say what that is?
Labor management
something.
Committee.
Okay. Just again for
Yep.
That's great. I didn't know what it was. So I better
where all
ask.
the heads of the unions come together and have meet about what they are very invested into these rates and what we can do for prevention. So.
And I know we see the newsletters that come out too, talking about wellness and things like that. I can tell you, it's kind of just again. Wild west out there in insurance. You're lucky if you have a great employer that can get it for you. But the fact that we're trying to help people be well and remind them of things is super important. Like a lot of the health insurance carriers do. Councilmember Pacheco.
Madam Chair, do we support silver sneakers?
There you go.
Medicare.
Just wondering, I'm on that too.
Well, and just as an example, I go to Lifetime. When I get that next mark, I can be part of a discounted rate there. So but that's a great question. Just.
I know, Madam Chair and Councilmember, we, the state employees have a program that would get discounts to like the YMCA. It's not affiliated with the council in any way, but being state employees, there are discount programs out there too.
Maybe something down the road, groups that care and are working on this here at the council can consider that. That's an incentive, let me tell you.
Yes.
And Councilmember Cedarburg, did you have something?
I just had a question. Have there been looking at different plans to lower costs as well? I mean, I noticed that there's not like an HSA account or a plan. You have an HRA plan, but not an HSA plan, health savings account plan, which I took, I chose that for myself. It was very beneficial. I mean, really monetarily, if you're healthy, it's great. And then I guess the other thing is I know people are going toward different rates based on family size. I mean, this is what's happening out there. I mean, it just is. And then the other thing people are doing, that if a partner has employed and has insurance, they've got to be on that insurance, not as a spouse. So I don't know how all of those alternatives come into play.
So Madam Chair and committee member, so our medical insurance is all done by RFP and out for bid. So after 4 years, we will still go out and see what the market is offering with those types of plans and what kind of rates would be beneficial with family sizes versus singles. There's also plans out there that, our HRA plan is also a savings. So the $3 million that I talked about earlier, that's the employer putting that in. If you don't use your insurance, if you're one of those lucky folks, that is yours. And when you leave the council, that will go with you. So it's kind of like an HSA, but it is
Yeah, I was just looking to see the difference. Thank you.
Great, Councilmember Lilligren, did you have something?
This is probably going deeper than this report was meant to go, but
Well, it's great though,
and early last term, I remember we saw a report, really that got very kind of detailed and specific about individual employees and what payouts were going toward, and it was a little startling at just kind of I don't want to say ban, that's saying people have a right to these kinds of insurance payouts, but that certain conditions, diseases, treatments really ate up a huge amount of our payouts, and for me that's just suggesting that that we could be kind of specific about addressing how we could get some of these rates under a little more closer to the national average, and I thought that was really helpful, seeing that level of detail. And then the other thing that's just in my mind is early in my Minneapolis City Council career in the early 2000s, we were talking about 25% annual increases year over year, so we're in kind of a different place, a better place. But at the city, we were offered a lot of incentives to bring our premiums down through, whether it was club membership, annual checkups, things like that. You can kind of score your way down to a lower premium. I thought that was really useful. It made me feel more in control of my
engaged.
And engaged,
Your
right.
participant, your partner in your own health. Yeah. Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand, come from Plymouth Street, the desire to try and target certain conditions or things like that. And however, a good example where we had a big increase a few years ago was for hepatitis. Well, it was because there was something that there hadn't been before for hepatitis, a cure, which, was expensive, but then the care going forward levels. And so I think, and even some of the costs, like if you look at individual things like ambulatory surgical centers and some of these preventative care facilities, they really lost money during the pandemic because they had to shut down because they were told no optional kind of procedures. And so they're trying to recoup some costs now. So it'll be interesting how the market, as it levels off over the next few years, to see where it's almost like our riders. It's going to level off, but where is it going to level off?
Madam Chair and committee members, I think it'd be really beneficial. What I'm hearing is maybe Fit for Life or HR come with kind of what are we doing for the employees more than just the setting of the financial rates.
And we've got a couple more minutes, so you're making great time, and we're asking you a lot of questions. That's awesome. Anyway, thank you, everybody. Bringing your own experience into this is great. So let's if we can move on to the next couple slides.
Absolutely, this is just wrapping it up, showing that we are at our reserves, which we've already talked about a little bit earlier, that we set it at 35% of our expenses, and we are flat, mainly because over the last couple of years, we have used a little bit more of our reserves than before, but we are still right at target, so something that we will absolutely be watching. I just want to end on a good note. Our dental rates will remain the same as they have forever. And dental, we will still, probably with Fit for Life, probably even put a campaign in that if you have healthy teeth and gums, that you will actually be a healthier person. So putting some campaign around dental.
That's great. And Marie, would we ever, given the fact that there's, that big reserve that's sitting there, just kind of waiting in case something happens in the future where we might have to draw that down? Or is there a limit by which we would?
Madam Chair and council members, like any graph, it can show a very large range. We're looking at $4 million, which when we look at the medical $88 million, it's not really material. If we had a bigger reserve or we wanted to use it for some use, we absolutely could.
Just question, and perspective is too. Do you have anything else for us?
That's what I had today.
Any last questions? All right, thank you so much. This is great information. I think, every year I learn more and more, and it's important again to take care of our employees. So thank you for your hard work, and thank you for being an expert in this and helping us learn more today. Seeing no other items to come before the council, the management committee. And before I adjourn, I just want to thank everybody for bringing your best selves forward into some really good debates tonight. And I hope we can continue to do that in the council, because the more we can talk about things, the more we can move forward. So thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.